Hello, I'm Todd Spatafor, and this is another Spectacular Thing. A couple weeks ago, I made a media backup station, and it worked great. However, I kind of glossed over the 4K aspect of the media backup, and I want to rectify that today. I was actually called out in the comments. You didn't show the firmware flashing, so we're going to show that today and describe what LibreDrive is. We're going to talk about the file size aspect, and I need to be honest with you, not every disk is going to work, and we will cover that also. Welcome to the 4K ripping episode of Media Backup Station. Why is 4K UHD different from Blu-ray ripping? Well, I'm glad you asked. First, there's the file size. The file size is twice the size of a Blu-ray disc. So if a Blu-ray disc is 25 to 50 gigabytes, a 4K video will be about 50 to 100 gigabytes. And second of all, is the hardware encryption. The AACS 2.0 and AACS 2.1 encryption is much stronger than Blu-ray or DVD. Um, Drive compatibility isn't universal, so just because you have a drive that can play UHD movies doesn't mean that you have a drive that can rip UHD movies. Quality considerations are HDR metadata, HDR10 and Dolby Vision. You want to preserve that information on the rip. Dolby Atmos and DTSX audio tracks, you want to keep those intact. And lossless is very important for 4K because you're ripping a 4K video. You don't want to compress it at all. You want to keep the pristine video quality. So remember that this is for backup purposes only. For UHD ripping, you need a drive that can handle the LibreDrive. For that, I have two drives. The first is a Pioneer. This is the Pioneer BDR XS07 UHD. And maybe we can see that here. It's a slot loading drive, and it works pretty good. It hasn't worked up till about a few weeks ago, but now it's running, and I can rip Blu-rays with this. The other drive that I have, this is the BU40N. This is what we're going to examine today. It's inside of a case, an external drive case that works pretty good. I had a connector before that didn't expose the drive itself. It exposed some proxy that didn't work with flashing the drive. So make sure that you get a good drive. This is the BU40N, and a good case so that you can connect to USB 3. Not all drives work. There is a list on the MakeMKV forums of what drives do work, and I would suggest taking a look at that list. On the MakeMKV forums, you can find people that will sell you a pre-flashed Blu-ray drive, and that might be the way to go after you see the involvement in building building MakeMKV and FFmpeg so that you can flash the firmware on a drive. These drives cost around $100 to $150, and that's about what you'd pay on the forums for a pre-flash drive. Storage implications, remember, like I said, these are going to be around 70 gigabytes per file, or per movie. So, 50 movies, that's 3.5 terabytes. 100 movies, that's 7 terabytes. So keep that in mind when you're ripping. Maybe you don't want to rip every 4K movie that you have, just the ones that look visually impressive, and then keep everything else at 1080p. Network transfer considerations include you've got to move these large 70 gigabyte files around your network. So 1 gigabyte network, that's the bare minimum. I would suggest 2.5 gigabytes, gigabit Ethernet for most things. I'm doing this today on 1 gigabit Ethernet. That's because I'm connecting to a Raspberry Pi 5 NAS, which you might have seen built in a previous video. And I haven't connected this to it yet. This is a 2.5 gigabyte dongle, and that's all that I need to upgrade to 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. And then it's just making sure that you can connect these to your ripping machine. I've got that M70Q setup that you've seen in previous videos, and it works with both of these drives simultaneously, so that's great. First things first is find a compatible drive. As I said earlier, you got to find a drive that works. I will link to the forums in the description below so you can find a drive that works for you. I'll also link to the drives that I have down in the description below also. You should back up the existing firmware first. If you don't, you run the risk of bricking your brand new Blu-ray drive. I did this on the media backup station itself. So that's an Ubuntu 2404 server. I just installed all the software that I needed. It installed Qt 5. I don't know if that's necessary. I think there's a way that you can build MakeMKV without GUI support, and in that case it would just, you wouldn't need Qt 5 support built in. So next I'm going to do the step-by-step flashing process, and you can see what it looks like. Before we get started on the flashing of the firmware, I just want to remind you that MakeMKV is required for this. MakeMKV is not freeware. It's free while in beta, and you need to find the software key in the forums to use it. I've purchased this. It's about $60, but you can get $10 off if you buy a pre-flash drive from Mike in the forums. Okay, first we're going to create a directory for our downloads. Then we're going to go ahead and download the FFmpeg source code for version 7.1.3. And next we're going to download the MakeMKV source code. MakeMKV comes in two parts, an open source part and a closed source bin blob. We're going to get version 1.17.7, as that's the version that we need for flashing our drive. Once the bin file has been downloaded, let's go ahead and download the OSS file as well. Next, we're going to download the SDF bin file. This is the keys. This contains the keys that are required for decrypting Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray discs. We get that from makemkv.com. In addition to the closed source SDF bin file that's included in MakeMKV, there's also an open source keys file that we can download from this location to get the open source keys, more keys that are updated more frequently than the SDF bin file is. Now, this server is very slow, so when you download this, expect it to take about 10 minutes, as you can see on this download here. And I forgot to do the -O option on wget, so I have to rename the file right now. That's what I'm doing here. It's a zip file that gets downloaded, so keydb's english.zip. Next, we need to download the firmware, and it's in a pack called the All You Need Firmware Pack off of NXYZO's GitHub account. So we'll wget that here and download it. Next, we need to install some software in Ubuntu to help us build this software. The full list of apt install items will be in the description below. Okay, let's start unpacking the software that we downloaded. First thing we're going to do is untar our FFmpeg, because that's going to be the first bit of software that we unzip or that we compile. And next we will unpack the MakeMKV folders. And there are two files that we need to unzip. Unzip might not be installed on your machine, so go ahead and sudo apt install unzip, and it should be there then. So we're going to unzip the all you need firmware pack and the keysdb directory file. Okay, let's get started with FFmpeg. The first thing we need to do is to change directories to it. And then we need to go ahead and do a .configure with some parameters. The parameters are enable static, disable shared, enable PIC, enable libvpl, and enable non-free. The last two are optional, and I've added them here so that I can have Intel QuickSync video. Now I forgot to install NASM, so I'm going to quickly install that here and then run the command again. And once we've configured, we want to go ahead and build the app. So we're going to do make with the -J command so that we can get all processors involved in this little experiment of ours. And finally, we want to install it with a sudo make install. Then we change directories to the open source MakeMKV folder, and we go ahead and do a .configure on that. And it's time to build with a make command. And once we build it, we need to install it with a sudo make install. Next, we want to navigate to the bin folder and build the bin binary. Making the binary is going to make you read the EULA, and at the end of the EULA, you need to say yes that you understand the EULA. Once you accept the terms of the license, then you can do a sudo make install, and it installs MakeMKV. I already have my license in here under the ARM user, so I'm just going to make a directory for .makemkv and copy that license file over from the ARM user so that we can do this flash without a message from MakeMKV saying that we're unlicensed. Also, because we're on an older version of MakeMKV, it wouldn't even let us without a valid license. Now we're going to drill into the all you need firmware pack into the directory for the BU40N. Next, we're going to go ahead and flash the firmware of device/dev/sr0 with the SDF bin file that we downloaded earlier. This is a raw flash, it's encrypted, and the input file is this bin file that we just downloaded in the all you need firmware pack. And of course I screwed up. This should be MakeMKV con instead of just MakeMKV because we're on the console. And it's flashed. The drive is flashed if you see the success message. Next, we're going to copy the keydb file over. Make sure that you unzip this file and that the file is named keydb.cfg, and then copy it to the MakeMKV folder in the root of your user's directory. Here I'm copying it to the home ARM user because the ARM user is who's actually using it. And there are two settings that we want to change inside of ARM. The first is skip transcode, set it to true because we don't want to transcode the file. We want to keep it in its original MKV goodness. And the second one is del raw files. We want to set that to false because we don't want to delete the raw files. Otherwise, we delete our files. And all went well, so now we should be able to rip a 4K Blu-ray. Here I'm going to rip Real Genius, but of course it comes up as Cha-Cha Real Smooth. So I have to do a title search to find the actual title of the movie, Real Genius, from 1985. Good movie, you should check it out. Now I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this actual rip. It took quite a long time, about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, somewhere in there. And in the middle, my screensaver came on, but I cut that out of this, this recording. But it does take a long time to rip a 4K Blu-ray, especially when there's extras. Like on this one, the movie is on there twice. I think there's the made-for-TV version as well as the actual version of the movie. So you can see that bar graph in the middle there kind of start over halfway through. Once it finishes ripping, it looks like it's stuck at 100%, but what it's really doing is it's copying those files over to the NAS, and that's going to take a minute, especially on a 1 gigabit connection. Okay, let's verify the rip took place. So we check out the list, and you can see realgenius.mkv is 54 gigabytes in size, and there's an extras folder. Next, we do media info, and you can see that in media info there are 33 text tracks and 13 audio tracks, as well as some data about the metadata about the video itself at the very top, indicating that we have about 74 megabits per second on our audio in our video stream. Okay, next let's take a look at a failed rip. This is Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. We're going to go ahead and correct the title once again with a title search, and then we're going to let it rip. Now in this case, I knew that it had failed because the disk drive was making a terrible, terrible noise. It's almost a grinding noise over and over again at about 60%, I think. If we zoom in here on the log files, you can see that we're getting a lot of warnings that POSIX error, remote I/O error, no data available, hardware error, timeout on logical unit. These are the kinds of things that you would see on a Disney disc. Disney discs just aren't worth it to me right now because this always comes around 60 or 70% of the rip. So you've wasted a couple hours in ripping the disc only for it to fail 2/3 of the way through. So for me, I just stick with the streaming version of these or the 1080p version. Speaking of 1080p, let's go ahead and take a look at the difference between 480p, 1080p, and 4K. Here's the same scene from Ready Player One in 480p on DVD, 1080p on Blu-ray, and 4K on 4K Blu-ray. And the difference between 480p and 1080p is remarkable. You can see features and detail in the skin and on the faces. The difference between 1080p and 4K, well, 4K is a little darker because I think HDR is enabled, and I didn't have HDR enabled on my computer when I took this snapshot. There is a difference, however. If you were to zoom in and look at the faces, you would see some difference between the 1080p and the 4K. And if we zoom in here really close on his face, you can see on the left is the 1080p and on the right is the 4K version. You can see that there's much more definition in his face on the 4K version than there is on the 1080p version. So what did you think? Was that more difficult than it's worth? It's worth it, I believe. You can rip DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4K UHD, all of them handled from the same software. You can also rip CDs, and you can enter data discs in here, and it'll rip an ISO of the data disc. It's fully automated when it works. You saw in the video that I had to change the title of the movie for every movie that I inserted into the drive. So that part's a little bit wonky, but you know, it's not bad. It's much better than it was. I would say you can insert a disc, walk away, and perfect quality rip about 70% of the time if you modify the title itself. I've never had a title successfully found in the drive. You get cinema quality at home for non-Disney content. For Disney, standard Blu-ray at 1080p or digital purchases is the way to go for Disney. I would suggest that rather than trying to get Disney to work. I have, however, having said that, I have had success on many Disney discs. Ahsoka, for example, would fail on disc 2 of season 1, and it would do that for quite a while until I updated the keys directory or the keys file, and now it rips fine. So maybe sometime in the future I'll be able to rip Attack of the Clones, but for now it remains a mystery for me. Make sure you set realistic expectations in your own head so you don't get disappointed with with the ripping process. So what'd you think? Would you do this on your own? Leave a comment down below, and while you're down there, hit the like button and the subscribe button so you can view more home lab content as it comes out. I think from here I'm going to move on to Kubernetes, Raspberry Pi 4 Kubernetes cluster, and see if we can make that work pretty nice. So subscribe so that you can see this new content as it comes out, and as always, thanks for watching.